If we're doing am I in the footsteps of Ernest Hemingway? We're in the footsteps of Ernest Hemingway almost exactly 100 years ago on this block, on this street. Is that right?
That's correct. So Ernest makes 2 trips to St. Louis while he's courting his first wife, Hadley Richardson. And he comes right here on this street.
Southern Illinois University Edwardsville professor Andrew Theising has been digging into what in some Hemingway biographies are a chapter or maybe even only footnotes. His book, Hemingway's St. Louis, is subtitled How St. Louisans Shaped His Life and Legacy. So let's start with his first 3 wives. Hadley Richardson, born and raised in St. Louis. Pauline Pfeiffer, whose family spent years here, she graduated from Visitation Academy. And Martha Gellhorn, also born and raised. But Theising says the other key figure, the other St. Louis woman, the first really, is the one he didn't marry, Katie Smith. That story doesn't start on this block in the central West End, but much further north. Every summer before the First World War, trains were filled with people from Chicago and St. Louis heading towards the resort area of Michigan's Lake Charlevoix.
Hemingway goes to Michigan every summer with his family, and the Smith family in St. Louis is also going to Michigan at this same time.
That's where Ernest met Bill Smith and his sister Katie. Ernest was just 17 when they met. Katie was 25. They were attracted to each other, but exactly what their relationship was is still open to speculation. But Bill and Katie would remain his friends for years. Hemingway would go off to serve in World War I as an ambulance driver. When he came home, he went back to Chicago to look for work.
Katie was living with her brother in Chicago, and there was a space for Ernest. So Ernest was living with the brother in Chicago, and Hadley was invited up for a party. And that's where they met. And it was all because of Katie Smith.
Which brings us to why we're on this street in front of this house. When Ernest came to visit Hadley, the woman he would marry, this is where he stayed 100 years ago.
Hadley really didn't have any family left in St. Louis. Her parents were gone. She was living with her sister. And so it was his friend Bill Smith who lived right on this block with Auntie Laura. And Auntie Laura is the matriarch of the family, and she's really a mother figure to Hadley at this time as well.
This picture of Ernest and Hadley is from another Hemingway visit. It's at her sister's house on Cates Avenue. It's no longer there. Their wedding was not in Chicago or St. Louis, but in Michigan. And then the Hemingways headed for Paris. They left St. Louis behind, but the connection remained. Pauline Pfeiffer, the Visitation grad, came to Paris. She and Hadley had mutual friends from St. Louis, and Pauline became part of the Paris crowd, and eventually Hemingway's St. Louis wife number 2. Now, this is not new information, but the authors of other Hemingway books probably did not dig as deep into the Pfeiffer family as Theising did, and he's almost certainly the only one who tracked down a package of flypaper.
This is a product that came from the Pfeiffer Chemical Company in St. Louis.
And Pfeiffer, explain to me, this is Pauline Pfeiffer's family. She's the second St. Louis wife. You've done some digging on this.
It's never enough for me to simply study something. I have to experience it, and so I like the memorabilia, and I like to track down documents and such.
Theising's book happily goes off on such St. Louis tangents, but the book is about Ernest Hemingway. And so much has already been written about him. Why write another Hemingway book?
It is a challenge to find new things, and usually things start with a correction.
Including some of Hadley Richardson's own recollections that came later in life.
And she actually has some mistakes in her biography, but they came directly from Hadley, so people are believing them. And so my goal was to, Hadley would say something, I'm thinking, that just doesn't sound right for that part of St. Louis. And then I would investigate a little bit and, oh, you know what? She's actually a block off in her description.
You'd think that this wedding party photo, every male member of the wedding party, would have been identified by now. But Theising saw discrepancies from book to book, and he believes he now has positively identified St. Louisan George Breaker. He gave Hadley away at the wedding. He also later embezzled much of her trust fund.
So you have added to the...
I like to think that I have added to our knowledge about Hemingway.
Hemingway's third wife, Martha Gellhorn, was an established writer when she and her mother went to Key West in 1936 and ran into the now famous Hemingway in, what else, a bar. But for St. Louisans, Martha's mother, Edna, deserves a much deeper dive. Social activist, suffragist, she helped start up the League of Women Voters. And her relationship with Hemingway is an interesting one as well.
She was the loving mother figure that Ernest didn't have and that he wanted in his life.
And yet she tried to stop the marriage?
She tried to stop the marriage. She was one of the people who could see through the facade that Ernest had and said she felt sorry for him.
His short book is more than a Hemingway slept here guidebook, although it is that. But it's about St. Louis at that time and that place, and those people and their families, their stories, their houses. And finally, we turn back to the woman who sort of started it all, Katie Smith. She never became a Hemingway wife, but Hemingway introduced her to a fellow writer, and she married John Dos Passos. Like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, one of the most celebrated of the so-called lost generation writers.
Yeah, we're not talking just 3 St. Louis women, we're really talking 4 St. Louis women.
We're talking about 4. That's
Yeah.
right.